Even though I've already made a video talking about my Nikon lens collection, due to some crippling GAS, I have acquired even more lenses. Starting at the wide end of the lenses, we have the 16mm f2.8 AF Fisheye Nikon lens. And this is a really fun lens to use. It's not really that practical of a lens because it is a fisheye lens, so it gives you a super wide angle 180-degree field of view in the corners, but it also gives you that crazy distortion and bendiness that a fisheye lens gives you. But even with that distortion, this lens is super fun to use. It's a really kind of interesting challenge to try and compose images to fit within the distortion, and it can be used to create some absolutely wild, hallucinogenic compositions and just sort of weird, fun images. Now I do believe that this was Nikon's last full frame prime fisheye lens that they made. I know they have that zoom lens that came a little bit after this, and there is that DX 10mm lens, but I think this is the last full frame prime fisheye that they made. Next up in the primes, we have the 24mm PCE Nikon f3.5. So this is a tilt shift lens, and I have been after a tilt shift lens for a very long time. I picked this particular one up recently in Tokyo. On my trip to Japan last year, I was actually wanting a tilt shift lens so much during that trip, and then being able to buy one on this trip and use it for the rest of it was an absolute joy. Having movements on your lens is so goddamn useful in landscape and cityscape photography. It's actually, I would say, an essential tool. Now, as for this lens, you might actually notice that it's a little weird looking because the knobs are aligned with each other. And that is because I've modified this lens by turning the rear bracket around so that the shift and tilt axes are aligned with each other and not perpendicular. And that means you get the ability to shift the lens up and down and also tilt the lens up and down at the same time. But after making that modification, this has become one of my favorite landscape lenses because it's so damn useful having tilt and shift. So next up we have the Voigtlander 58mm f1.4 Nokton lens. And this lens is an absolute dream lens to use, particularly on any older manual focus film cameras. Now this lens is an AIP lens, which means it's an AIS lens with electrical contacts. And what that means is that this lens will actually work 100% perfectly on any old Nikon cameras, but it'll also work really well on the newer Nikon cameras that can use the electrical contacts to read information from the lens, like the focal length and the f-stop. Now the image quality out of this lens is absolutely amazing. It's razor sharp. It has a beautiful soft wide open f1.4 background. Although the focus can be a little bit soft at 1.4, you do have to stop it down to about f2.8 to really get the pin sharpness out of this lens. The aperture ring is lovely and clicky and well damped, and the focus is just a smooth dream to use. It's super easy to nail focus with this, with a nice long focus throw. I particularly like shooting with this on like the f3 because it's just really, really nice. So my next lens is actually a bit of an oddball lens because it is the Nikon 5cm. And yes, you heard me right, it is a 5cm lens because this particular lens is from like 1960, just after the original Nikon F came out. Now the fact that this lens is so old also makes it a pre-AI lens, so you can't mount this on a lot of cameras. You need to have the ability to fold the AI tab up, or it has to be just straight up compatible with pre-AI lenses. Now there are conversion kits you can do to mill out a slot in the aperture ring in order to make it an AI lens. Now the only reason you would actually go out of your way to buy the centimeter version of this lens, like I did, is because you wanted to collect it. And you can actually find the 50mm version of this lens much cheaper than the centimeter version. It's not a particularly good lens in modern standards, although for the time it was apparently a very, very good lens. But in terms of modern standards, it's, not all that useful, it's just a collector's lens. So the next lens is the 85mm f2.8 PCE Nikon lens. And this is my second perspective control lens, and it's actually a really useful lens. You wouldn't think that a 85mm tilt shift would be all that useful. However, this lens is pretty much designed for product photography, and it excels at that. Now, what use do I have for it? Well, I use it mostly for making thumbnails for YouTube videos and doing video shots top down, where I want to be able to adjust the focus plane to be correct and to actually not have things going in and out of focus weirdly when I'm doing close-up shots. It is also a very technical, specialized lens as well. It's not a lens you're going to buy unless you just want one for some reason, or if you actually need one for product photography. An absolute great lens to use for those cases when you need it. And the last prime lens for this video is, of course, the big boy that's been hanging out in the back, which is very thick and heavy 400mm f2.8 G VR1 Super Telephoto Nikon lens. And this thing has been one of my grail lenses for a while. And I found a really good deal on this on MPB a few months ago. Very cheap because it didn't come with the lens hood or the carrying case and a bunch of other accessories. But the lens itself is perfect. It came with this drop-in filter and a third-party lens cap. So I pounced on buying it very quickly when I saw this listing go up. And a super telephoto lens like this really is kind of the dreams of a lot of aspiring wildlife photographers, because if you want to get those beautiful wildlife shots, you really do need a lens like this to capture them in that way. You know, you can use a 200 to 500 5.6 and it is a spectacular lens for wildlife, and I do use mine regularly. But when you compare it to something like this, it just falls completely flat on its face. You know, there's a reason why these lenses are coveted and so goddamn expensive. Now, one of the issues, of course, with this lens is the fact that it is goddamn enormous. This thing weighs like 5 kilograms, and it is actually straining my arm holding it up here with one hand by the lens foot. Now, lenses like these actually have quite a steep learning curve. You actually have to learn how to use one of these lenses properly, and you have to buy all the different accessories you're going to need to be able to use it properly, like tripods and gimbal heads, or in my case I actually went with the monopod approach. But you also have to buy, you know, things like a replacement foot for the lens, because I'm actually using a third-party Wimberley foot for this lens. The original foot that comes with it is huge. It actually sticks out to like here instead. There's also other accessories you'll need to buy for this. For example, if you don't have a lens hood, or if you don't want to transport the gigantic 2-stage lens hood that this comes with, you'll have to buy like a third-party lens hood. I have one of those soft folding lens hoods that goes around the lens with Velcro. Also, if you want to use things like filters or polarizers, you have to buy special drop-in variants, which are very expensive now because these are only on the second-hand market. I think the polarizer version of this, which has the little gear wheel that allows you to adjust the polarizer from outside, is like €400 used now. So one of these lenses can be very pricey and it adds up quite quickly. But even though you're hauling such a big heavy lens out into the field and using it, and it's a bit of a struggle, when you see those images and videos that this thing can produce, it just makes it so worth it. Another interesting kind of thing about this particular lens is that it's coming with me on a trip that by the time you see this video, or the day this video goes out, I'll already be on that trip using this lens in a very fun location, hopefully. When I bought the 400mm lens, I also bought a bunch of different teleconverters. So I have the TCE 1.4 version 3, I have the 1.7 version 2, and the 2X version 3 as well. Now, I bought all these teleconverters secondhand, of course, because I buy all my lenses secondhand. There's no reason really to buy lenses brand new unless you're buying something where there's no secondhand market. But with the teleconverters, the 1.4 is by far the most useful on the 400. It turns it into about a 540-ish millimeter, you know, thereabouts, f4 lens, because you lose one stop of light with this. TC 1.7, you get about a 600mm lens. I think it's a little longer than that equivalent, and it's about 4.8, 4.5, somewhere around there in terms of light. The last teleconverter here is the 2x, where you lose 2 stops of light, so that means it converts the lens to about an 800mm 5.6 equivalent. So let's talk about some zoom lenses. The first one here is actually a DX lens. This is the 12-28 35-56 power zoom Nikon. Now this is a very recent DX lens for the Z mount, and I used this very heavily on my trip across Asia for 6 weeks. It's a great little video lens. It's small, compact, light, sharp, and it does the job perfectly well. There's not really much more to say about it, but it's a solid little DX lens for something like the Z30, which is my main video camera. Next up we have the 24-120 f4G VR lens. And this is sort of your standard f4 zoom for Nikon F mount. All the camera manufacturers have the equivalent, generally the 24-105, but for some reason Nikon makes the 24-120 versions of these lenses. And when it comes to F mount lenses, I think this should be one of the first lenses in your kit. It's a bit of a chunky boy, but having a 24-120 with image stabilization and a constant f4 aperture is just incredibly useful to have on any camera, film or digital. There's not really much more to say about it apart from the fact that it's just a really useful lens. Of course, here I also have the 24-120 f4S version. This is for the Z mount. It doesn't have any image stabilization, but that's not really an issue because all of Nikon's full frame Z mount bodies have in-body image stabilization. So as for the difference in quality between the F mount and the Z version is handily leagues ahead of the F mount version. It is so optically superior, it's not actually even funny how good this lens is in comparison. So if you're planning to buy a Z mount camera and you want to invest in a really good full frame zoom for travel and for just general purpose usage, get yourself the 24-120 f4, and I think this should be one of the first lenses that anyone who really wants to invest in glass should buy. It's just so damn useful. And the final lens in this video is the 70-200 AFS Nikon f2.8 G VR2 lens. When it comes to 70-200 lenses, do I really need to give any introduction? They are the classic workhorse telephoto zoom lens. Now the reason I bought this G VR2 version is because it's the last version of this lens that works properly on film cameras like the F6. Now I bought this secondhand in Tokyo from Fujii Camera in Nakano for about 350 euros with all the tax discounts, so it's pretty damn cheap for such a useful telephoto lens. Well, apart from the issues that this lens is kind of known for, which there are two. The first issue with the lens is that it's kind of known for having its autofocus motors die. Apparently these lenses are getting to an age where the AFS motor just stopped working kind of randomly in them, and they're very hard to get fixed. But because the lens was so cheap, I decided to risk buying one, and if it breaks in like 6 months to a year's time, I'll be very sad, but I'll have gotten a lot of use out of it, so I won't really mind too much. The other issue with this lens is it has horrible focus breathing. It's actually almost comical how bad it is. So if you zoom into 200mm on this lens and then you try and focus at minimum focusing distance, the focus breathing is so bad that you're getting a field of view equivalent to like a 135mm lens, not a 200mm. But apart from that issue, the image quality on this is perfectly fine. I used it on the Z8 on the F to Z adapter, a bunch, worked really well. I've used it on the D850 and it worked fantastically. It's plenty sharp and it does a really, really good job. And those are the lenses I've picked up over the last year. And even with all of this, the gear acquisition syndrome is still burning strong because gas is eternal.